I've had a rough couple of months. It's been almost 2 months since I posted the video, but we're getting back at it. These Canadian winters can really get to you after a while. But I apologize. I haven't been here for a while, but we're gonna get back to it. So, hello, my name is Lucas, and today we're going to be talking about a little bit about altered states, but mostly how you can go about achieving them. So, what is an altered state of consciousness? An altered state of consciousness is when you change your mental or spiritual state through specific means to make it more susceptible to otherworldly energies, spirits, and basically it makes your brain function in a different way than you would regularly, which helps to open you up to those experiences. Now, that's kind of like a basic description, but for everyone, altered states are going to manifest differently in the body, also depending on how you go about doing them. So it's really hard to describe what they are, how you would, like what they feel like, and that kind of thing. So mostly what I'm going to talk about in this video is how you achieve them so you can experience that for yourself. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but why would you want to enter into an altered state of consciousness? So for thousands of years, practitioners, witches, and shamans have been using altered states of consciousness to let go of the ego and separate themselves from the everyday world. So once separate from the world and from the self, they can begin to interact with spirit or the divine. And when you let go of the self and the everyday and the mundane, we can start to see the subtle workings of the supernatural in the world around us, and also within ourselves. It really opens you up to spirits and energies that you might have been unaware of if you were just kind of going about your daily life. Another reason to utilize altered states is the letting go of the ordinary and the ego, which can allow you to become a blank slate for the divine or spirit to use you. Often within these states, we can channel spirits or the sacred to receive their wisdom, or to allow them to work through us to manifest into the physical world. These kind of things are often called like horsing or like puppeteering, like that kind of thing. Ritual possession. There's just a few words for them, but they basically allow the entity to have more of a physical experience. So altered states of consciousness can be a meaningful and beautiful tool to help deepen and strengthen your practice. Now a warning. Just kidding. So just be aware, as with all magical practices, ensure that you are protected and safe when you are undergoing these practices. If you can, always have someone there to watch and ensure everything is going okay and you are okay. Call in your spirits and your gods, and have your wards and protections up to ensure that you are safe from outside harm or from nefarious forces. Make sure that you are in the correct physical and mental state to undergo these practices, and make sure that if you are doing them, it's not going to negatively affect you in any sort of way. We don't want anything happening to you. So, how do you go about entering into an altered state of consciousness? So first we're going to go over the three primary types of methods and just kind of give like a quick rundown of them. So the first types are depressive methods. And a depressive method is a slowing down of your energies and a relaxing of the body. This also slows the mind and it begins to eliminate all the hustle and bustle of the everyday kind of like life or the mundane. It allows your thoughts to slow so you can then hear or see or sense or perceive that which you couldn't before. A lot of people within like the shamanistic community or like hedge writers, they often refer to these as pseudo-death states. So it's a diminishment of the self to the point where you're getting the closest to death you could possibly get. I know that sounds scary, but don't be scared. It's like a death state. It's not an actual death state. I know that can be frightening for some, but it's okay. The second are excitive methods. And excitive methods are the ones that you use to grow energy. So usually they revolve around physical movement, sensational awareness, or entering into a euphoric or ecstatic state. These methods allow you to become consumed by one thing, whether that be a sensation, idea, movement, or practice. And that allows the ego to fall away and allows you to experience influences from spiritual sources. Or, conversely, it will stress the body to the point where it triggers a dissociative state, where your mind kind of separates itself from the body and allows you to kind of become a blank for spirit to come through to you. And the last kind of grouping of methods are known as balanced methods. So through control, you can raise energy, putting you into an ecstatic state, or you can lower your vibration or energy and bring you down into a diminishment state, making you calm and subdued. So these practices can go either way, depending on how you perform them. So we're going to start with depressive methods. So the most popular type of depressive method is meditation. This is probably the one that you're most familiar with. So meditation is concentration on something and letting go of all else. And eventually, as time progresses and with a lot of patience, everything else kind of falls away, leaving you in a kind of void space. So in these moments, you can receive images, sensations, feelings, emotions, basically anything from the spiritual realm, depending on what your psychic senses are. I'm not really going to go over methods of meditation here, as there are like hundreds of resources out there that could probably explain it a little bit better than I could. So go out and find some resources on meditation. They are literally everywhere. And get to meditating and see what happens. One thing to note about meditation, especially when I go really deep, I notice that my body starts to feel like very, very heavy, and it will actually start to feel like kind of crunched up, like almost like I'm being pressed, whether that be by like gravity or like some force. But let me know if you get like a different sensation when you go really, really deep with your traveling or your meditation. So the second depressive method is isolation or deprivation. So this is done by removing access to one or all of your senses. So the most common form of this is the removal of eyesight. So most often than not, people will enter into and sit in a darkened room with no light whatsoever, usually with like something underneath the door jamb so that there's no light coming in whatsoever. And what they'll do is they'll sit there within the pitch black and they'll kind of sit vigil, devoid of any external stimulation, and see what comes from nothing. It basically puts you into a liminal state and allows you to kind of open up to what's out there. It's said in these moments that the mind begins to play tricks on you. But some believe it's not in fact the mind, but it is an awareness of something beyond ourselves. It is said that even Odin used this method when hanging himself from the world tree. Symbolically, he plucked out one of his own eyes and gave it as a sacrifice so that he could essentially pseudo-stare into the void and produce the runes. So when performing this method, there are a few things to be aware of. Using this technique can often trigger anxiety in people, as it's not really a natural state for us to find ourselves in. So it's always important to remember when trying this to relax, breathe, and keep yourself calm. If you are interested, an interesting thing you can try is a sensory deprivation chamber. So these can often be found at like spa and wellness centers. And basically what they are is they're a large tank of like salinated water that is kept at the exact temperature of your body. They're often like soundproof, lightproof. So when you lay in there, you lay there completely weightless, floating in the salinated water. Because the water is the temperature of your body, you do not actually feel it, so you feel like you're floating in nothing, and there's no sound and there is no light whatsoever, so you cannot see and you cannot hear anything. It's a really interesting experience, and I encourage anyone out there, if they're interested, to go and try it, because it's really cool. You can have some really interesting experiences. But yeah, if you can, try to find one in your area and see what happens for you. So next are excitive methods. So the first and most common one is a little adult, and that is physical pleasure. Whether that be by yourself or with someone else, if you catch my drift. The fast kind of repetitive movements and the excitive nature of what you're doing. Also, that building of intense energy and sensation can begin to shift your consciousness out of the self. Focusing intently on those sensations, all else can kind of fall away and you can start to see signs of spirit. This may be not to everyone's taste, so feel free to ignore this one if you wish. But for some, it can be a liberating and powerful form of magic, especially for those who find themselves to be a little bit repressed in that area of their life. So the second most common excitive method to achieve an altered state is one achieved through pain. So again, we can look to Odin as an example here. When he tied himself upside down to the world tree, he also wounded himself, plunging his spear into his torso, so that the pain and the excessive blood loss would trigger a dissociative state. This would allow him to enter into the void and call forth the runes into existence. So the trauma to the body and the continued pulsing pain can trigger a dissociative episode. This is in no way me saying to go out there and start hurting yourself, because please do not do that. I would never want you to go and hurt yourself, so please don't. So if you are going to try to use pain as a technique for achieving altered states, one thing that I will say is that it can be tricky for some people who struggle with self-harm or have dissociative disorders. Now, it's always essential to remember never to do anything that will end up triggering you or causing you an issue. Never feel like you must compromise your mental or physical health for your practice. And if you struggle with self-harm or dissociative disorders, do not feel bad. There is help out there for you. There are lots of resources. And don't also feel bad, because this is not the only way that you can enter into altered states. There are lots of other methods out there for you, and like I said, do not do anything that will put you into a state that you do not want to be in, or that will compromise your mental or physical health. But one way people go about utilizing this technique in a safe and regulated way is through the art of tattooing. So in those moments where you're getting your tattoo, your beautiful art or symbolism placed on your body, you can interact with spirits by letting go of the self. And lastly, there are the balanced methods. So the first is breath control. Now, breath control has been used throughout the world for millennia. So yogis, Sufis, Buddhist monks, shamans, and martial artists have been using breath control to gain control of their body, mind, and spirit for thousands of years. So why not you? Consciously take control of your breath. You can choose to slow it down or speed it up, and each one will kind of have a different response on the body and the spirit as well as the consciousness. So slow inhales and slow exhales, and the body will begin to relax. But if you begin to pick up speed and increasing your breath and the sharpness of it, you start to excite the body. So one thing to note is I typically use the quickened breath method in achieving altered states. And the increased oxygen flow to the brain often puts it into an overdrive state. And it allows you to kind of either, again, dissociate out of yourself or begin to notice small things that you wouldn't normally. It basically, yeah, like I said, kicks it into overdrive. I have noticed that the sensation of that is actually very similar to a panic attack. I struggle with panic attacks, but I have noticed that the reaction of the body is very same. It puts you into like a hyperventilation state, and the physical responses of the body are very similar to when you're having a panic attack. But that panicky kind of dread feeling is removed. It's a really interesting feeling. I'm interested to know if anyone else out there has tried this, if they have a similar experience, and kind of feel same. So another balanced method is through the use of substances. So people have been using substances for years to ascend to higher states of consciousness. So all we have to do is look to legend to confirm this. So throughout history, there are tales of witches applying ointments to their brooms and using them to fly outside of themselves or astral project, or to enter into altered states. We can also see another example of this here on YouTube. Some witches gather together and reasonably regularly and partake in alcoholic beverages, using this to dull the mind and slow it down in order that they can receive divine information and do divination for people here online. So, depending on your substance, it can go either way, either increasing or decreasing your energy levels or consciousness. Now, when using this method, always be safe, always follow the laws of your local area, never take or drink anything that you do not know exactly what it is and where it's from, and always do your research. Ask your medical professionals, and please, 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 always be safe. Do not break the law. Always, always, always be safe. So the last balance method is movement. Slow and steady movements can lower your energy, thoughts, and vibrations. And slow and controlled movements bring a slowing of the self. You can see this practice in the form of yoga. Now, yoga has been a form of active meditation for a very long time, incorporating slow, definitive movements in order to bring about a meditative state. Conversely, quick and repetitive movements can elevate and increase energy, bringing joy and ecstatic states. It's vital to remember when utilizing this method to be very in touch with your body. So sit with yourself, feel your body, and begin to listen to it. What does your body want to do? How does it want to move? Listen to it and relinquish control, allowing it to move freely however it desires. And soon you'll find yourself in an altered state in no time. So one thing to remember when interacting with altered states and how you go about achieving them, there's one thing that kind of underlies everything. If you kind of look back on all of them that I've described here, the underlying theme is of release, letting go and surrendering to something outside of the self or within the self. It's about letting go of control. It actually reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from an unlikely source, Marvel's Doctor Strange. It goes, "You cannot beat a river into submission. You have to surrender to its current and make its power your own." And so it is with altered states of consciousness and how you go about achieving them. You can't force them. You can't really control them, but what you can do is surrender to them and see the magic that they bring. Alright guys, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, if you'd like to progress a little bit more with this pagan, please hit the subscribe button as I try to post magical content fairly regularly. I know I've been a little remiss in that lately, but I'm getting back to it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below, or if you have any ideas of things that you would like to see from me, put those down below. And I hope to see you guys in another video soon. And as always, may your path always be an interesting one, as there's nothing worse than being bored. Have a good one, guys.